SAYTEK, and you are watching How I Play on DJTT Tools. Firstly, I want to talk about my REM MIDI clock, which is over here. This basically provides MIDI clock to everything. This is a super reliable MIDI clock. I used to sync stuff to Ableton and stuff like that, and I found it quite unreliable. And then I used to sync stuff to hardware, and I found that if anything kind of ever went out of sync, it kind of left me in a position where it's really, really hard for me to, get things back in sync. Whereas this REM MIDI clock does one thing, and it does it really well, and that's send out a super stable MIDI clock to everything. It keeps the timing of my whole setup. I really want to talk about my Roland MC707 groove box. Now, I was a big fan of groove boxes all through the 90s when I was growing up. The real appeal for me of this groove box is not only is it like having a studio in one box, you've got all the classic kind of Roland drums in there that you can layer. You've got a lot of sound design kind of tools in there as well, so you can put effects on them, you can EQ them, you can pitch them up and down, so you can really start to get in there and take the original sounds and mess around with them. But also, it's got a really powerful synth engine in it as well. So the synth engine is not like very hands-on, you have to go and do a lot of menu diving, but you can really, shape sounds inside this box. Also a sampler as well, but what makes it really appealing for live performance is it's laid out in such a way that you've got lots of faders. You've got a fader on every channel, and you've got 3 knobs per channel. You've also got these pads here which can, trigger clips with them. You can mute things, you can cue things, and all this kind of stuff, which means that once you have that going, you've written a pattern, and you can really just like jam it out and arrange it live using this box. So I was talking about designing a kick drum. So this kick drum here, quite a powerful, techno kick drum, is the layering of 2 different kick drums. One is sampled from somewhere else. One is an internal kick drum, and then EQing it and putting it through effects in the machine, and then adding the classic drums on top of it. So you just got a very, classic house techno pattern there, and then I've written simple bass line there, and then some chords, and they're actually polymetric, so that means that in the sequencer you can set it so it loops over less than a bar or less than half a bar, so it doesn't have to fit in perfectly into a bar or half a bar. So it's kind of looping and running alongside everything else in a different kind of time, almost like a different time signature to everything else. So I just do a little jam on it. So let's go into clip here, and let's start with bringing some drums in, and then we can go to the mute here. So it gives you a lot of power when you're, performing live. A lot of, control, a lot of hands-on stuff, and it's really easy to perform live with. Next up, I want to talk about the Novation Peak. Absolutely love the Novation Peak, and I have this, Ableton is actually sequencing the Novation Peak. Really, really powerful synthesizer. Most of my lead sounds are coming off this in my live performances, or sometimes bass lines as well, and it's really, really powerful. You can do, everything on it from, really nice kind of mono basses, acids, really nice acids, to like, because it's polyphonic, you can do really nice chords on it as well, and like really kind of futuristic, kind of cutting edge, almost FM-y sounds as well. So it's great for sound design, but once again, the real appeal for it for a live performance is the fact that you've got so many knobs and faders on it. You don't have to do any menu diving when you're performing live. You can just jam away on it. You've got your envelopes, you've got your filter, you've got your LFO, you've got, your effects section over here. Once you know where everything is, you can really, really get into, jamming with it, basically. So this is a kind of mono synth line. So next up, I want to talk about Ableton, and I want to talk about the Novation Impulse 25 at the same time, because the way I like to use Ableton is that once I turn my computer on and I load the project, I don't want to touch the computer, the trackpad, or the keys on the computer at all. I want to do everything from my Novation Impulse 25. That way, I can just jam out, and Ableton almost becomes a bit of hardware. The main way that I use it is I create my own. I suppose they're very similar to a loop pack you would buy from a shop. And what I do is I basically make up the elements of a track as a loop, an 8-bar loop, and then I bounce out all the individual elements. And they can be made up in Ableton, but also maybe in Machina, something like that. Or using the V collection for synth lines, the Artura V collection, and just really bounce it all out. So I've got all the individual elements, and then I can trigger those elements live in Ableton. That gives me lots of hands-on control. I'm using Session View in Ableton. I do actually run a couple of soft synths in Ableton. Actually, I use the D16 collection, so that you've got a 909, 808. And 303 emulator in there, and I've got a few knobs assigned to the 303, the cutoff, the resonance. I've added some reverb and delay to it, and also pitching the ride and stuff like that, and I can do live during the performance from the 909 emulator. So basically, and all across this keyboard here, I'm kind of triggering a vocal sample here, or a synth sample here, or playing a couple of synth samples here, maybe some hand claps over here, so I can really get hands-on triggering loads of stuff from the keyboard. So yeah, Ableton, Novation 25, and once that's synced up to the other gear, at the moment, like I said, I'm sequencing the Novation from Ableton, but quite often in the past I've had lots of hardware with its own sequencers, like the MC707, and I've got no real set way of working with it. Sometimes I will, with the 707, write a whole pattern on the 707, so that's the bulk of my track, and then just trigger a couple of samples over the top of it from Ableton. Other times I'll start writing something in Ableton, and then I'll start adding some melodic elements or some drums from the 707 over the top, so I can just mix them in live. And I'm kind of mixing between Ableton and the 707 like a DJ would, basically. So I've got kick drums coming from here, I've got kick drums coming from Ableton. I can take the bass out of one kick drum, I can filter out one thing, and just kind of mix between the patterns. Quite often I've got hi-hats coming from both, or or elements coming from both, so it kind of gives me that fluidity where I can just kind of jam whenever I want to bring something in, I can. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you how I would use Ableton with the Peak and the MC707 together. Triggering a sample here over on Ableton. want to talk about my effects section. So I've been using the Chaos Pad now for many years, but this is a great box. You know, I've got a lot of kind of synth sounds on here. Let's have a little listen. Let's put it on here. Kind of whooshy sounds. Synth sounds. Also, I've got some, kind of cool delay effects on there as well. So let's put a filter on this channel here and. We can really get in there. So some other interesting effects and a reverb. So yeah. Great bit of kit for effects, and also kind of adding those kind of swooshes and kind of that kind of thing into a live performance. The kind of stuff that you'd normally do in a DA in a DAW, but you can do it hands-on and live, which is really good fun. Next up, the RMX 1000 from Pioneer. This again an effects unit, but it's also a sampler. So I've got put my own samples in it. So I've put my own percussion samples in it and my own 909 samples in it. So if I go to these banks here, and that will loop. Once you have the music playing, you can start. Up and down. Start using the ribbon. Also got these really powerful dance floor effects like this. You can bring it back in like this. So once again, a great kind of tool for just doing those real kind of dance floor kind of effects on, and also programming little percussive loops and drum loops on the fly when you're performing. Next up, I want to talk about the Pioneer V10. Absolutely beautiful mixer. I've got to admit, it's quite a new addition, so I haven't really got deep into the effects on it yet, but something that is really handy is it's got a compressor on every channel, and when you're doing a live performance, that's great, because it's kind of quite hard to keep everything, the levels of everything in tab. It mainly use the compression on the MC707 and the Peak. The MC707 actually has a built-in compressor, which is great, but I use a little bit of compression on that, and then I have a secondary compressor here, and that really means the levels get tamed really nicely, but it's also nice and transparent as well. Peak, being having a lot of analog filters and analog distortion and stuff going on it, means that it's actually the levels vary a lot between patches, so you're constantly trying to ride that out normally, but that compression just adds that extra level of control. Also, I use the Volca kick. Now, the Volca kick, I was using it live, but actually I've started sampling it a lot more now. It's actually a really nice analog kick, where you can just design your own kick drums, and I like it for the more kind of techno kick drums. And I've got quite a few in there that I've kind of designed, and what you can do is you can sample it into the MC707, and you can also sample it into Ableton. So quite often I make kick drums for the the tougher kind of techno stuff that I'm making, and they will be processed inside Ableton or further processed inside the MC707. So let's talk about the mixer layout now. So the way that I kind of have stuff is I have 2 channels from Ableton, and they're coming from my Focusrite Scarlett 2 in 2 out, and so I just basically I have the main stuff coming out of channel 1, and then I have the 909 drums and 303 coming out of channel 2, and the sound effects coming out of channel 2, and the occasional synth line coming out of channel 2 as well. And that just means I can independently affect and manipulate the channels when I need to. And then I have the MC707 coming out of this channel 3 here, and then the peak into channel 4. So quite a simple way of doing things. But having that DJ mixer really means that I can just kind of improvise and jam stuff out live, and have that kind of DJ kind of esque element to my performance as well. There we go, I think I've covered everything. I'll leave it there, thanks.